Thank you everyone for joining the presentation today about swaggonomics. That is just a completely made up word, but I thought it was an interesting way to combine swag and economics and budget and just the whole sort of study of swag. So I am Jason Dunn, former AWS employee for the past 6 years, and I spent a lot of time and budget thinking about swag. And I want to share some of the lessons with you to help you change how you think about swag and maybe do things a little bit better. This presentation is sponsored by Kotis Design. They are the swag vendor that I used when I was at AWS. So you'll hear me talk about them a little bit, but the primary goal of this presentation is to educate you on swag. Now, I can see comments on the side, but we will try to have some time at the end for Q&A. So as I'm going through the presentation, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, but I will probably ask you to repost them at the end so I can get to them. We have a full hour to go through today, a lot of stuff to get through, but I will do my very best to leave some time for Q&A. So once again, welcome to folks from all around the world. Really appreciate you being here. So let's jump into it. So we're going to go broad, not very deep. I have a lot of different things to cover. One of my biggest struggles in creating this presentation, and by the way, you're all the first people in the world to hear this presentation, was there's so much that I want to say about swag and swag budget, but ultimately I had to trim it down to fit within an hour. So we're going to go broad. Now, the focus here is on the things I've learned that will help you how to make the most out of your swag efforts. So why should you listen to me? Well, this is my wall in my basement with a whole bunch of swag. I also have some backpacks here behind me that you can see in the backdrop. I spent millions of dollars on swag at AWS over the course of the 6 years that I was with AWS. Ultimately, it was all for a community of over 3,600 people from 110 plus countries. And so I spent a lot of time, mental energy, thinking about swag and also how to do swag better. In fact, virtually all of my budget every year for the Community Builders program went towards swag and shipping and all the things that go along with it. So why swag, right? Why should you spend money on swag? Well, one of the reasons is that people join communities and programs partially for extrinsic benefits. That's just a fancy word that means what we get for doing something. So I'm a big fan of Freakonomics, and one of their the things that they posit right in the first book is that all human behavior is about incentives. And so if all human behavior is about incentives, then all community behavior is about incentives. So you have to look at things through a lens of incentives. Now, no real community can exist without intrinsic motivation. Well, that's a fancy word that just means the internal thing. So intrinsic motivation would be, I'm part of this community because I want to help other people. I'm part of this community because I like the way I feel when I help other people. But some communities can exist without extrinsic. So you can think of like a local charity or an organization like a nonprofit. People join it to help other people. They believe in the cause. But communities and programs run by billion-dollar, trillion-dollar corporations are not really going to exist without extrinsic motivations. So things like benefits, swag, discounts. These are the things that people expect from these companies and these programs. So you, as a program owner or someone involved in this, should then also think about, these are the things that I need to bake into my program. So when we think about swag, I want to encourage people to not think about swag as just merchandise. I want people to think about swag as being kind of the currency of the community, and it's sort of part of membership. So do people care about putting logos from other people or companies or programs on their bodies? Yes, they do, on their clothing, right? $35.75 billion. That was the 2024 number for global licensed sports merchandise. So sometimes people think like, swag, is it really a big deal? Well, go talk to a football team, a soccer team, any sports team, and see how much money they make selling a team jersey. People want to identify with the things that they care about, and that's part of why swag matters. So if you're giving away swag, you shouldn't think about it as being giving away a $10 hat or a $20 t-shirt, with your logo on it. What you're actually giving a community member or a customer or even an employee, if this is internal swag, you're giving them an object that represents the community. sort of represents your company or your program, and it should have meaning to the community member, right? It shouldn't just be some random thing that has no meaning. You're not making just a t-shirt, you're making a tribal artifact. And what I mean by that is people want to identify with the company, the program, whatever it is that you're running. And if they put, their t-shirt on and it has the logo of that program, that means something to them and they're going to enjoy that. Now, this is an example from a couple years ago, but these are just some screenshots I took from different people posting Community Builders Swag, the program I used to run, on LinkedIn and various social media. So it always filled my heart with joy, to see people celebrating the swag that I was sending them. But there's also a lot of other great benefits that are not just, you feeling good about your customers enjoying the swag, but swag is part of membership. Now, swag without meaning is what you get at trade shows. So if you a pen, a sticker, or something that just a random person picks up because they want a pen or a sticker, that's kind of trade show swag. My encouragement to all of you is to not ship trade show swag, right? Think about your swag in a different way, a higher level way. A great example of whether or not customers will care about your swag is the laptop test, right? Lots of folks put stickers on their laptops, especially developers. It's just kind of part of their cultural identity. Do they care enough about your program or your company to use up some of the finite real estate that they have, on their laptop to put your sticker on there? If they do, that's a great thing because it means that they care about your program. Now, the ROI of swag, right? What's the return on investment? So there's a lot of different ways to think about this, and we could probably do a whole, session on this. But I'm going to touch on a couple of key things. Think about swag in kind of two different ways. So one of them is actually brand advertising. So if somebody, gets your swag and they wear it at a trade show or they post about it on social media, right? This is a signal to other people that somebody is interested in the topic, is interested in your company, is interested in your service. And essentially it's brand promotion, right? It's brand advertising. Another way to think about it is more like a CPC ad, like a cost per click. So, and the reason I mention this is that swag posts, when people share, can drive applications for a program, engagements, sharing. So you can think of the output of sending swag to your customers as being a little bit like paid media. So an example of this, would be in 2026, there were 12,734 people on the waiting list for the Community Builders program. So that was the program that I used to run for AWS. Those are people that signed up to join when the applications went live. Well, what was really interesting is that part of the things that drove the continual wait list and people signing up were posts about swag. So on the left here, or on the right rather, there's an example of somebody posting, their swag. Other people saw that post and then became interested in the Community Builders program. So this is a really powerful ongoing mechanism that I purposely built for the program, where we use swag to help encourage awareness of the program and help people to sign up for the waiting list. And the really interesting thing, right, is this is all genuine, and being genuine is part of building an advocacy program. And so all of this is things that you really can't pay for. And when customers do it because they love what you're sending them, you can't really beat that. So you can think about this as the best media buy you never made if you're running a program like this. Now, sometimes people will join your community just to get the swag, and that is kind of a side effect. You don't really want people usually joining just for the swag. So you want to build a program or the community so that it's worth staying for. So swag is just one of the things that helps you to work on the overall package that you're offering your customers in your community. Another important thing is to think about swag as a portfolio. Think about the whole experience end to end. So does your swag build into something? If you're giving away yearly swag, like in the Community Builders program, when I was running it, we would give away yearly swag. And when someone renewed for another year, they would get an additional swag kit. So does it feel random, or do these things link together for an overall, experience that the customer will really appreciate? And can you keep scaling it, or are you going to hit a wall of complexity where you might regret some of the past decisions you made? I certainly had those experiences, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in the Community Builders program, for example, in year one, we gave out a swag kit that had a bunch of little things. So it was a hat, tumbler, notebook, a few other things. But everything that they got in year one was designed to go into the backpack that we gave out in year two. So I linked these two things together. So we did a custom backpack, which I'll talk about in a second when I talk about the importance of being able to create custom swag. And everything fit inside that. But the same mentality went into years 3 and 4. So in year 3 and 4, we did some other things that would fit into the backpack. Now, the backpack was the most expensive swag out of all of the years, and I really wanted to make an investment for people that were returning again. So if you have a program or something where people are coming back year after year, think about how these things are going to link together. In years 3 to 6, we did different things, a gadget pouch, a really nice high quality pen, and all these things kind of were part of the backpack experience. Now in year 7, I hit what I like to call sort of a scaling wall, right? So I had essentially 6 years of kits that all had different things. Altogether, there were probably 50 different individual items of swag. That created a ton of complexity. So one of the things that I was going to do this year before I departed AWS was switch to a points-based system where people in subsequent years would use points to get the swag that they wanted. And I'll talk about points-based systems and the importance of them a little bit later. But think about how you scale your swag decisions and whether the decisions you're making, they may cause scaling issues down the road. Another fun thing you can do with swag is lore, naming it. So people in my community love the names of the things that I gave them. So anyone can make a t-shirt or a hoodie, right? But if you give it a cool name, it somehow takes on a life of its own. So we had this, this giant, ridiculously huge mug, and I decided to call it the Mug of Endless Energy. A totally silly fabricated name, but it gave that piece of swag an identity. And when people posted about it online and shared it, this giant 40-ounce mug, it meant something because it wasn't just a mug, it had a name. And I did that with all my other swag items. And so one of the things that makes the difference between just a $20 shirt and a $20 shirt with a name is part of the story. So if you can tell an interesting story with your swag, you will make it memorable. Sourcing and retail acquisition. This is a fancy title that basically just means, what are your swag choices? So with some swag vendors, you might run into sort of the catalog trap, right? The swag vendor has a certain number of items and you say, hey, I want a t-shirt or I want, a mug or something. And they come back and say, this is what we have. Now, most vendors will actually have a myriad of options, sometimes almost too many, and it becomes a bit of a problem. But some vendors don't want to bring on new suppliers, meaning, companies that you want to buy from, because for them, it creates friction, delays, and documentation, and everyone wants to do that for you. Some programs don't escape the catalog, meaning they're always picking from what's in the catalog. The reality, though, is that everyone else running a swag program out there is also picking from the catalog. And sometimes you just have a lot of overlap, and you don't want to have that if you can avoid it. So one of the things that Kotis in particular did for me when I was working with them at AWS was they allowed me to onboard vendors. Now, not all vendors were successfully onboarded. There was a company called Nano Bags that they just couldn't work things out with. But Alpaca, Nomadic, some of these brands that I thought my customers and community members would really enjoy, Kotis was able to bring them on. And then I was able to offer the swag to my community members in a way that other programs might not be able to. And so that was one of the things that was really important to me. Now, sometimes though, a vendor will not actually offer you their entire library of things for swag. So there's a company called Belroy, and I went to Kotis and said, hey, I really like this, this sling. I want to explore giving this to my community. And Belroy's sort of swag options were a very narrow stripe of their product. There was only a couple of options. And so sometimes that means that the thing you want from the particular company, they might not offer for swag. And so that's where you get into what I call the retail acquisition model, right? So getting something that is essentially retail and maybe even not putting your logo on it. Now that's a bit of a heretical thought, right? Because we think of swag as always having a company logo on it. Well, I wanted to do something in particular for my community at reInvent last year. And what we did with Kotis was actually really interesting. We did some custom branded packing cubes. And so they had the AWS logo on. It was very clearly, an AWS swag product. But there were a couple of anchor electronics items that we put inside the packing cubes, but they were actually not retail branded. And I didn't care about that, right? Because I had the retail brand outside, but your community, your customers, your employees will always remember that that came from you, even if it doesn't have a logo. Now, of course, it does mean that if they post about it on social media, or they're not going to, see your company logo, but I think that's a small price to pay to give your customers something that they really want. And so we did a couple of cool anchor things and it went really well. The community loved their reInvent swag. And so sometimes going to retail is a good option to consider. Now, there's typically a cost. Swag vendors make money off the swag you buy from them, right? And so you should think about there being an added cost. With Kotis in particular, it was about 20%. And for me, that was okay. And I didn't mind paying it because it was worth every penny. Now, customization is another thing to think about when you're doing swag. Again, there's the catalog where you pick things that already exist. Sometimes there's a retail option, but sometimes the coolest thing, in my opinion, you can do is actually create something unique and interesting for your customers, your community. So the first project and the biggest project I did with Kotis was something I lovingly called the bag of holding. And this is a backpack, but it was a custom designed backpack that I put a lot of thought into it. I'm a backpack nerd, as you can see from the earlier slide that shows my wall. I love backpacks and slings and ways of carrying things. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a backpack? So I worked with Kotis to design something. It took quite a bit of time to do. And when I announced it, this was the really fun part. I don't expect you to read all this, but this just goes to show you that we made a lot of changes between the V2 and the V3. I also gave it a version number, right? So my community was full of developers and technical builders. And so we think of software in terms of versions, and so there's a V1, which is sort of a generic version of the backpack. V2 was our first attempt at a custom backpack. And then V3 was based on all the community feedback that I received. And I took all that feedback, made some choices, listened to most of it, didn't listen to some of it because sometimes the things that people wanted conflicted with the features that other people wanted. But the point is, it was a really exciting, interesting product that customers absolutely loved. Now, it got more expensive because when we added new zippers and pouches and changed the materials and upped the overall quality level and including the size, it got 46% more expensive. But for me, that was worth it. Now, it took time, it took some effort. It took 2 different samples that had to come from overseas before we went into production. So I learned a lot about how to make great quality swag. And there were some things I learned along the way, about testing and validating and all these other things, but it was very interesting. Why do this, right? Why go through all of this effort to create something custom when you could just go to a catalog and pick, a perfectly fine retail quality backpack? Community recognizes effort and it means something to them. It also means something that they get to wear or carry something that no one else in the world has, right? This is a unique tribal artifact that you're giving to them, and that means a lot to the community. It's very, very special. And I saw this comment just last week when I was talking about the backpacks, and this is really funny. This is one of my community members, and his main complaint was that every version of the backpack got better, and it made him a little jealous, but it made him really, really proud. So if you can create a scenario where your customers are dreaming and wishing that they could get their hands on your new swag, that is a really good problem to have. And another great thing is when people ask how to buy it, there were so many people in the Community Builders program that wanted to know how they could purchase your swag. And we weren't selling the swag. You had to, do things and get points to get it. But that's also a really good problem to have. Now, this is an example of the swag that never was. When I started getting into doing the custom swag with Kotis, I had this aspirational idea of creating a travel backpack and kind of the ultimate backpack. And this is something that will never see the light of day, but it was going to be this beautiful clamshell design. And I had so much fun working with Kotis's product designers to come up with something interesting. So maybe a version of this will exist in some alternate timeline, or in a new job I go to, I'll make a different version of it. But the point is, custom swag can be a lot of work, but the dividends that it can pay off are absolutely huge if you make something that your customers will love. Now, another thing that swag can represent is not just an item, that everyone in the community gets. It can be part of an accomplishment. And so I want to tell a little story about the golden jacket. So the golden jacket in AWS world is something that somebody gets when they achieve all 12 certification exams, and it is the pinnacle of AWS technical mastery. If someone has a golden jacket and they've passed all the certification exams, it means that they have easily spent hundreds of hours studying and prepping and doing these very challenging, tests. And so it's personal, it's coveted, it's something that they earn. But here's what's interesting is that there was no official path to get this epic achievement because people would get it via different means, right? Maybe they work for an AWS partner and maybe someone at AWS would get it for them. And I found that really frustrating because for 4 years, I got asked the same question. Jason, how do I get a golden jacket? I've passed all my certification exams. And for 4 years, I had to tell them, I don't know how, you need to go talk to somebody else. And I did not like doing that. It made me deeply uncomfortable that after all the work that these folks went into for passing their certification exams, I couldn't get them this thing that they coveted. So I came up with the solution. Because, hey, I had a swag vendor, I could order things, and I have a platform for delivering things to our community members. So what we did was actually relatively simple. Kotis found a golden jacket that looked, close enough. It was shiny. It was amazing looking. We made an online claim form, which is pretty simple to do. I partnered with someone inside the AWS training and certification team for validation to make sure that the person claiming the golden jacket did in fact deserve it. They passed all their certifications. And then once a quarter, it was a little bit of work to basically align things, give customers a code to ship them their jacket, and then they got their golden jacket. And the payoff was wonderful, right? Public goodwill from the community, social media posts, and recognition that no AWS program had ever really done before at an official level. I want to say in the first year or the first kind of 16 months we did this, I think it was over 140 golden jackets were delivered to customers, which was absolutely wonderful. If you have good swag infrastructure and a good swag partner, things like this are possible. And it was an amazing payoff. That very first year we did it at reInvent, gathering all the folks together with their golden jackets and giving them to them and then doing a group photo. It was absolutely wonderful. So this is a great example of where, the right kind of infrastructure, a little bit of work, and a community need can all be solved. And you can do something great for your community and customers. Now, one thing to think about as well when you're thinking about your swag is size, choice, and scale. Sometimes people think this is not a big deal. You'd be shocked what a big deal it is. So a classic example is backpacks versus t-shirts. So a backpack is kind of a one size fits all, right? You order the backpack and every customer gets the same backpack. But let's say you want to do some t-shirts. Well, you want to do t-shirts and you want to have a t-shirt that will fit everyone. So you probably have to go from an XS, like extra small, all the way up to maybe 4X or 5X or even 6X, depending on the brand. You want to give all your customers the opportunity to wear this swag. Well, all of a sudden, that means you may need up to 6 times the inventory. You need a system to collect this information. It can actually get very, very complicated. So the trick when you're trying to decide what to order is to be thoughtful and be deliberate. We did some data collection I did at AWS a couple years ago, and customers actually preferred items that they can wear more than items that they kind of carry with them, meaning they preferred by a slight margin, t-shirts, hoodies, etc., things that they can wear. But that also creates a lot of complications. And so practicality might mean that you, as the person making the decisions, you might need to go with one size fits all swag, like backpacks and things like that. That's why for the Community Builders program, for the yearly kits, I did not include t-shirts or anything customers can wear. And sometimes people would ask about that. And the reason why was just simplicity and scale. I did not want to introduce a layer of complexity with size swag as the yearly gifts. Now, if you have a tool like a CRM that can store customer t-shirt sizes, this can make it easier because you have a permanent record. And that way, when you're ordering things for your community, you can actually base your orders and your sizes on actual data instead of just guessing. Now, a plus is that if you're doing an in-person event, size swag is a lot easier to deploy. You order a bunch and people can pick the size they want, but remember to order some extra ones, because sometimes the size that a person thinks they are, it might not actually end up fitting them, especially if you have an event where people from all around the world are coming in. Because as we all know, a North American size large is different from a European or an Asian size large. Sizing is not exactly a universal standard. Now, sometimes you might want to do impossible swag. And so I want to talk about this for just a minute. This is an example of a laptop sticker that I made, and this was a vinyl sticker. I went to just, an online vendor that did vinyl stickers, uploaded a logo, and made this. It was really cool, but it turns out to be essentially impossible to scale because, of course, there's so many different kinds of laptops. There's Macs, there's PCs, there's Chromebooks, all kinds of different sizes. And people saw the sticker on my laptop and they said, that's amazing. I want one for my laptop. I basically never was able to do this because there was no way to scale it. Even if I partnered with a vendor and gave out, coupon codes for them to order the vinyl sticker for their particular laptop, all of a sudden you have a second stream of customer service and shipping and billing, and it's just a nightmare. So make sure that you fully vet whatever interesting idea you have for swag, because you might love the concept, but when you think about executing it, things could fall apart. Now, I want to talk a little bit about points-based redemption portals, because this was something that was new to me when I switched over to Kotis from my previous swag vendor. And so, the old way with a lot of swag vendors is pretty straightforward. You get a code and there's one item and there's no choice. The side effect of that I ran into in the first couple years of running the Community Builders program was duplicate swag. A customer would do something cool and we'd send them like a t-shirt. And then a few months later, maybe a year later, they would do something else that was cool. And it's like, hey, let me give you a code for a t-shirt. Here's a code. Oh, I already have a t-shirt. Oh, okay, well now here's another code. So there's all this hassle and duplication and reissuing of codes, which was just an absolute nightmare. So when I switched to a points-based system, it was like the heavens opened and the sun shone down. One code gave people access to all kinds of different items and they could make their choice. And this was revolutionary for me from a swag perspective. So Kotis offers a points-based portal that I absolutely fell in love with. They allow you to create different sort of tiers and different points values. And so I created 3 different tiers with 3 different points values. And then I had little add-ons. And so every customer would either get 60 points, 110 points, or 160 points. And then the 10-point difference in each tier would allow them to order a couple of small things, right? So they ordered like a big thing, but then they could get some patches or a tumbler or, a pin or whatever. And then we had different things they could order. So for 50 points, they would maybe get a t-shirt or a desk mat or a tumbler. I would also take swag from past events and put it up here. So for example, for reInvent 2023, I had some extra leftover kits. And so we actually shipped them back to the warehouse from Las Vegas and then put them in the swag portal. So if someone couldn't attend reInvent in person, they could use their points to get the swag from that event, which is a great way for them to experience that. We had a 100-point tier with, higher quality items, backpacks, slings. And then we also had a 150-point tier, which is like the ultimate tier. So like a really, expensive hoodie, $150 hoodie. And this is where the amazing travel backpack would have gone if I would have made it. And the other fun thing that I did with Kotis and this points thing is that you can have detailed write-ups, so you can write little stories about the swag and, give it fun names. And again, this just makes it more memorable for your customers, and it allows your swag to be differentiated from the swag they might get from other companies. So the thing I really loved about the portals, Kotis let me set the item description myself. So if I found a typo or I wanted to come up with something, I could control it as the customer. I decided when the entry was active and when it wasn't, which I found really, really fun. So I could actually queue up a whole bunch of new swag. And then what I would do is I would release sort of a new line of swag. So in Q4, I would start ordering and planning. And then in Q1, I would announce sort of a new line, like a fashion line of swag. And then I would roll out new items over the course of, the first half. And again, this is just a way to make swag part of the conversation with your community. It gets people excited, and it just allows, again, you to stand out from other programs. Now, you can decide the point value. It could be based on cost. It could be based on rarity. Kotis' platform allowed for a lot of flexibility, which I really appreciated. So I want to talk a bit more about platform capabilities, which sounds like we're going to talk about accounting. But one of the really interesting things about working with a swag vendor is it can take a lot of time, and you want a partner that has a really optimized system. So a typical way, and the old way that I did this with my first swag partner was, they create a proof, right, for a new swag item. They send you a big PDF, 15, 18 megabyte PDF. It's in your email. Do you even have storage space? I had a coworker who always had an overflowing inbox, and sometimes they wouldn't get the email from the swag vendor because their inbox was full. So the big PDF gets sent in, you open it, you look at it. You probably don't have a PDF editor installed on your computer, so you're going to email back and put in your changes in an email, and then it goes back to the vendor, and then the whole cycle repeats. And then if you need to look up, oh, did I tell you I wanted the logo moved? Well, you got to look up the email. So this is the way I did swag for a couple years until I switched over right to using Kotis, and their platform was something that was really a strong differentiator for me. So the way it works with Kotis, and ideally any other swag vendor that has a real platform, right? They upload a proof, to a browser-based platform. You're reviewing it in real time. There's no download. You approve it directly, or you're commenting directly on the platform, and then that proof moves right into production. And you can see your notes, you can reference things, and if there's any confusion, there is a record in the platform, not in your email. It also makes for easy reorders. Once I had sort of the perfect piece of swag, if I wanted to reorder it, I just went into their platform, clicked reorder, and the swag was produced, which was wonderful. Saved me a ton of time. And so an example of like a proof, this was a sling, an alpaca sling that I was doing with Kotis, and they showed me a couple of different options in different colors, and then I decided to tweak the black and make it a little bit lighter, so it's more like a light gray, and all these kinds of things work really well in a platform, and they do not work well at all if you're doing it using email. It also allows for a lot of precision, right? So if you see something, you can ask for a change, and then again, you have a record of it, which is hugely beneficial. Now, I want to talk a little bit about shipping and how that experience impacts the experience that your customers have, because fulfillment of swag, once they pick and they add to cart and then they, check out, that's only part of the experience. The other part of the experience is how long it takes them to get the swag and if there's any complications in them getting it delivered. So my first experience was what I thought was kind of normal, which was my first swag vendor would only ship on Fridays. And so there was one shipping window per week. And if a customer, claimed their swag on a Monday, it wouldn't ship until that Friday. And I thought that was normal, but it was never great, right? It's not a great experience. A much better model, and the model that Kotis happens to use, is essentially daily fulfillment. So if a customer orders their swag on a Monday, it's going to ship on a Monday. So when you're looking at different swag partners, you want to ask questions about the fulfillment. How often do you ship? What's your shipping cadence? You want to think about your shipping cadence as part of the customer service experience. So how fast their swag gets to them matters. In most parts of the world, right, we're spoiled, especially if you live somewhere where Amazon ships. We think of like 1 and 2 day deliveries. We think of next day deliveries, early morning deliveries. These types of models are baked into a customer's head. And so when they order something and 5 days go by and they haven't even gotten an order notification, it can actually create customer service emails or people coming back to you and saying, hey, I ordered my swag. Why hasn't it shipped yet? These are the things you want to avoid with the right swag partner, because your community will notice the delay, and that's not something that you want. Now, once the item ships, that's when customer service might need to get involved. And so you want to have a partner that has really strong customer service for your customers and your community members. Some swag vendors will sort of circle back, or they'll use kind of a teams-based approach where you have an account team and then one person on that account team is responsible for all the customer service. That's the way it was with my first swag vendor. And this one person handled everything: missing packages, wrong items, international issues. That did not work very well, right? Lost shipments can pile up. Wrong items, it can take weeks for these things to resolve. Customs issues become, full-blown crises. Customers get very upset, rightfully so, if they're trying to get something that you promised them and they can't get it because it's snarled up in customs paperwork. That's a really unfortunate situation. And what that means is that if you don't have a partner that can handle these situations, you'll get pulled into that vortex, and it uses up a lot of your time. So that is not great. A better model, a much, much better model, is a dedicated multi-person team where their entire job is to focus on swag. They're centralized, they're specialized, and they are responsive. This is what Kotis offers to clients, and it's what I took advantage of. I believe they had a 5-person customer service team, and it was such a great experience. We never had any issues with the customer service because customers would get all kinds of help, customs paperwork, all those types of things. Great customer service will make sure that your customers get their swag. And again, the insight here is just that the customer service that your swag vendor is providing is part of the overall community experience, the program experience. And so you want to make sure that you're partnering with the right person. Now, the other part of shipping swag is the economics of it. And this is where it can be very eye-opening if you've never shipped internationally before. So here is a real world example. You get a t-shirt that's about $30, and that's what you pay for it. You get your logo on it. I have a $30 t-shirt. Great. You think it's going to cost me a little bit of money to ship to someone. Well, things are very different in different parts of the world, especially with all the tariffs that have been introduced to our world the past couple of years. I saw real world examples where for a $30 t-shirt, I would cost about $170 to ship. Import duties, custom fees, brokerage fees, these things add up. So a $30 t-shirt might end up costing you $200 to ship to that customer. I saw this the most in Brazil. There's just something about the way the Brazilian authorities have created their, customs and import duties, that what it means is you just have to make sure that you're thinking about your swag budget, not only from the perspective of what it costs you to make it, you're baking in the shipping costs. And honestly, the first year you start shipping internationally, you should have a very, very healthy buffer to make sure that you don't blow your budget on duties and other types of things. So every year I had to be thoughtful about this. You should also plan for losses. Probably, and this will vary, but in my experience, about 5% of your shipments will have problems. Sometimes things get stolen. Sometimes things get held up by customs and not released. I had instances where customs would open an item and they would remove something and then ship it to the customer, and the customer would only get part of their, kind of swag kit. So you have to think about that and think about what your remediation effort will be. Are you going to ship the customer the one missing item? Are you going to ship them the whole thing, or other types of options? Now, shipping itself really matters too, right? The actual costs of things matter, and you really, really, really want to pick a partner that has the most efficient shipping possible. And part of shipping is also thinking about how much things weigh. So you might think, well, I want to ship my customers this. If it's a hoodie or a t-shirt, great. Are you going to ship them, 10 pounds of stickers? There was one example that always stuck out in my mind. There was a group of folks that were doing some shipping, and they came to me and they said, hey, why is this shipping cost so much? And this was another team at AWS at the time. And when I dug into a little bit more, I found out that they were shipping a 14-pound swag kit, because they were actually shipping hundreds and hundreds of stickers, because this swag kit was meant to be an event enablement kit that they were sending to someone to do an event with. And so that's different than the one-on-one swag. So if your swag is heavy, you're going to pay a lot of money to ship it. And that is even before you get into customs and duties and all these other sorts of things. So before you order, thousands of swag items, you want to think about how much does it weigh, and then what are some estimates for what it's going to cost to ship. So small and light is the best kind of swag. But if you're going to do something bigger, like a backpack, you want to have it be obviously as lightweight as possible, and you don't want to stuff thousands of stickers inside the backpack. So if you pick the wrong swag partner, you can get some shocking invoices. It can cause a lot of problems with your budget. And as a budget owner, for your program, the last thing you want to do is have to go back to your manager and say, hey, I just got this bill. I can't pay it. We need to go ask leadership for more money. Nobody wants to be in that particular situation. So the right way to do shipping is a partner that has highly optimized shipping experiences. One of those things can be what is called like a low-cost last mile delivery. The right swag partner will do things like ship via courier on the first part of the journey. And then when it gets into that country, it'll actually switch to a low cost, sometimes a mail delivery service type carrier. Now there are, there are pros and cons to this. Sometimes it means you lose detailed tracking that you would have with like a big carrier. But these are trade-offs you make about when it comes to trying to save your budget. This is something that Kotis was really, really good at. So much so that when I switched to them in the first year, the numbers in terms of the amount of money I was able to save on my budget was kind of shocking. This is the part of the presentation where it really seems like I'm shilling for Kotis, but these are real numbers. And if you own a swag budget, you have to care about these types of things. So I'm not going to go through all this, but just as an example, you can see some of the numbers here, right? My previous vendor for shipping the same item, a 1.8 pound package, was about $54. And when I switched to Kotis and the way they optimize their shipping, it saved me almost 50%. And Australia was even more shocking. It was over $121 to ship this item to Australia. And with Kotis, it was $34, 71% savings. So as you can imagine, that meant that I had a lot more budget to use for swag. Because this is kind of the dark secret of everyone's swag budget, right? You have a swag budget, let's say it's, $100,000. If you're lucky, half of that can be used for swag, the actual things you're giving to customers, and the other half will just be for simply getting that item into your customers' hands. So that's the kind of thing that people don't think about, but it's just the reality of the way swag shipping works. Pre-pandemic, or at least in early on, before things got super weird with shipping was a lot less expensive, and there were not nearly the level of complex tariffs that are in place now. As we all know, once a price goes up, it very rarely comes down, and that's what I've seen with shipping costs. And so you really want to make sure you're picking a partner that optimizes it. And then this is just another example of how Kotis saved me a ton of money, and it allowed me to reallocate those funds into swag, and specifically a lot of it went into the custom swag, like the custom backpacks. Because what I didn't mention before is, depending on the custom swag item, there will be minimum quantities. So it might be 144 for a t-shirt. Well, for backpacks, because they're a really complex item, the minimum quantity was actually 500. And so 500 backpacks means a lot of swag budget. Saving money on shipping and customs allowed me to reallocate that budget and move it into more interesting swag products. All right, so 45 minutes, I made it. We're at the end. And nobody disconnect yet, because I have something special I want to make sure I share with all of you. But I want to thank Kotis Design for sponsoring this event. I want to thank all of you for attending. And as a way of thanking you all, if you are someone that has a swag budget, if you're someone that would like to explore maybe switching vendors, or you're signing up for swag for the very first time, this QR code will take you to a very special landing page where you can save 10% on your first $15,000 in swag spend. So it'll save you up to $1,500. This is a referral link. So this link helps me, this link helps you. And I'll leave this up for a couple of minutes, but I really want everyone to take advantage of this. So if you're someone that is, you're spending money on swag, I really would encourage you to take advantage of the benefits that Kotis has, to offer. And I hope that this presentation has been interesting. I hope you've learned lots about swag. Hopefully, if you're a swag budget owner, you have some ideas about how you can optimize your own swag spend, and how you can maybe make some more interesting choices, and maybe break free of the traditional, I'm only going to order what my vendor puts in front of me, and you'll push for more interesting options that your customers will enjoy. I'm going to pop back up here to this slide so people can have the QR code, and there's also that link here.